This video's goal is not to make you an expert on Ukrainian history, but to allow you to understand Ukraine's social and historical context in the 20th century. To learn more about Ukrainian history from early days, check the link in the description. The Russification of Ukraine. The Russification of Ukraine was a body of laws, decrees and other actions undertaken by Imperial Russia and later by the Soviet Union to strengthen Russian political and linguistic positions in Ukraine. The Value of Circular of 1863 was a secret decree of the Minister of Internal Affairs of the Russian Empire, by which many publications in the Ukrainian language were forbidden. It states that the Ukrainian language never existed, doesn't exist, and cannot exist. Further restrictions were placed on Ukrainian language in 1876 by M's Ukaz, which completely prohibited the dialect because Ukrainian identity and language was seen as a threat. In the end of the 19th century, there was a migration from Ukraine to distant areas of the Russian Empire. According to the 1897 census, there were 223,000 ethnic Ukrainians in Siberia and 102,000 in Central Asia. An additional 1.6 million emigrated to the east in the next 10 years after the opening of the Trans-Siberian Railway in 1906. All of this happened due to efforts to suppress the romantic and nationalist feeling rising in Ukraine since the beginning of the 19th century towards national rebirth and social justice. The suppressing efforts were intended to avoid an internal conflict by moving the people from their territory. World War I. In 1914, the great powers were divided into two opposing alliances: the Triple Entente, consisting of France, Russia, and Britain, and the Triple Alliance made up of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Tension in the Balkans started with the assassination of the Austro-Hungarian heir by a Bosnian Serb. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia came to Serbia's defense, and soon the conflict expanded to include Germany, France, and Britain along with their colonial empires. Ottoman Empire, German Empire, and Austria-Hungary formed the Central Powers. In 1915, Italy joined Britain, France, Russia, and Serbia, forming the Allied Powers, while Bulgaria joined the Central Powers. By the end of 1917, more than 20 countries were involved on the war, joining Allies' side, including the USA, after their passengers and merchant ships were attacked. In the aftermath of World War I, 4 empires disappeared and numerous nations regained their independence. The war ended by 1918, but the formal state of war between the sides persisted until the signing of the Treaty of Versailles with Germany. Ukrainian People's Republic. Ukraine entered in the First World War on both sides, having 3.5 million Ukrainians fighting for Russian Empire Army, while 250,000 fought for the Austro-Hungarian Army. Ukrainian People's Republic was a country that existed between 1917 and 1920 in the aftermath of the war. The republic's autonomy was recognized by the Russian Provisional Government, and at this time UPR declares sovereignty over most part of actual Ukraine. Later in 1918, Russia withdrew their recognition of an independent Ukraine under national excuses. The West Ukrainian People's Republic was also very important and controlled most of eastern Galicia between 1918 and 1919. It emerged as a breakaway state amid the dissolution of Austro-Hungarian Empire and united with Ukraine People's Republic and its autonomous Western Oblast in January 1919. Russian and Austro-Hungarian empires were defeated on the First World War and ended up seeing their empires dissolved, what allowed Ukraine to have some independent years. Civil War in Russian Soviet Republic. Between 1917 and 1923, a Russian civil war took place, sparked by the overthrowing of the monarchy and the new Republican government's failure to maintain stability, resulting later on the Soviet Union. The Russian Soviet Republic, the world's first constitutionally socialist state, was established on 1917 and emerged when the Bolsheviks overthrew the provisional government established after Russian Empire fall. This age was also marked by the loss of much of the Russian Empire frontier, as the newly independent nations of Estonia, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland were born. Poland, which regains independence and sovereignty over their lands 123 years later. Soviet-Ukrainian War. The Soviet-Ukrainian War was the term used for the events regarded essentially as a war between the Ukraine People's Republic and the Bolsheviks. This was a civil war fought among the different Ukrainian republics, founded by Ukrainian nationalists, monarchists, and Bolsheviks, with the help or against neighboring states. The Ukrainian Bolsheviks, who had defeated the national government in Kiev, established the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic on the 30th of December 1922. Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. In 1921, Belarusian and Ukrainian lands were divided between Poland and Soviet Russia on the Treaty of the Peace of Riga, ending the conflict between them. On December 1922, the Russian SFSR, the Transcaucasian SFSR, the Ukrainian SSR, and the Belarusian SSR approved and signed the Treaty and Declaration of the Creation of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR. The Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic was a founder and member of the Soviet Union between 1922 and 1991. As mentioned, it emerged from the Soviet-Ukrainian War against the Bolsheviks and marked the finale of UPR's independence as it suppressed the romantic nationalist desires of the nation. Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky were the leaders of the Bolsheviks. Lenin gave power to Stalin, and this marked the Soviet Union history with an excess of mortality and famine between 1927 and 1953. Holodomor. Some positive aspects were seen due to the aftermath of Ukrainian SSR's creation. As the Kornizatsiya, an early policy of the Soviet Union, it searched the integration of non-Russian nationalities into the governments. What didn't last long, the industry of Ukraine was very profitable and had big reserves of steel and coal. Because of the First World War and the number of fatalities in Ukraine, many ethnic Russians migrated to Ukraine to replace those who died. Donbas region could be found in Russian propagandas, and it was mentioned as the heart of Russia, promoting again the Russian colonization of the area. By 1932, the aggressive agricultural policies of Stalin's totalitarian regime resulted in a famine known as the Holodomor. This is seen by some people as genocide and caused a direct loss of human life up to 10 millions, the majority of them Ukrainians. World War II. World War II was a conflict between 1939 and 1945 that involved all the world's major countries. It was the most destructive war in history, and millions of people were killed. It was fought between the Axis, Germany, Japan, and Italy, and the Allies, Britain, the US, and the Soviet Union, among others. This conflict started with the invasion of Poland by Germany and Russia, and ended with Russia's victory over German Nazis. It resulted in 70 to 85 million fatalities. Some elements formed an Ukrainian insurgent army that fought both Soviet and Nazi forces. Others collaborated with Germans when they invaded the Soviet Union, because they saw them as the ones who would liberate them from Soviet rule. Ukrainian SSR losses and aftermath of the World War II. While the Second World War took place, the control over Ukrainian SSR was entirely lost. The widespread human and material losses were immense to Ukraine, which represents 40% of the Soviet Union losses. About 1.5 million Jews were murdered at Ukraine by the Nazis during their occupation. 6.8 million civilians and military personnel died in war. 3.9 million Ukrainians were evacuated to all the Soviet Union. 2.2 million Ukrainians forced to work labor camps by the Germans. And Adolf Hitler destroyed 85% of Kiev and 70% of Kharkov. What left 19 million people homeless. Thousands of enterprises, farms, and agricultural machines were also destroyed. While the war brought an enormous physical destruction, Soviet victory over the Nazis and the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact of 1939 caused a territory expansion to Ukraine. Galicia, South Bessarabia, Northern Bukovina, and Carpathian Ruthenia were added to the Ukrainian SSR. Some amendments also allowed Ukrainian SSR to become one of the founding members of the United Nations, part of a deal with United States, to ensure a degree of balance in the General Assembly. Crimea gifted to Ukraine. After the death of Joseph Stalin in 1953, there was a shift in the posture towards the other republics. In an attempt to reconcile the relationship with the Ukrainian SSR, Nikita Khrushchev transferred the Crimean Oblast from the Russian SFSR to the Ukrainian SSR. Just only 22% of the population was ethnic Ukrainian. The Crimea transference happened on February 1954 to celebrate the 300th anniversary of the Pereyaslav Agreement, which brought Ukraine under Russian rule 3 centuries before. This event was celebrated to prove the old brotherly love between Ukrainians and Russians, the USSR as a family of nations, and as a way to legitimize Marxism-Leninism. The Stalinization and stagnation era. Nikita Khrushchev eventually won the ensuing power struggle by the mid-1950s. In 1956, he denounced Joseph Stalin and proceeded to ease controls over the party and society. This was known as de-Stalinization.
Colleague of Lenin in the stormy days when the Bolshevik Revolution shook the world, the man who took the mantle of Lenin when he died, Stalin is now officially branded a dictator by his own party.
Brezhnev replaced Khrushchev as Soviet leader in 1964. The Brezhnev era began with high economic growth and soaring prosperity, but gradually significant problems in social, political, and economic areas accumulated. Social stagnation began following Brezhnev's rise to power, when he revoked several of Khrushchev's reforms and partially rehabilitated Stalinist policies. The period's political stagnation is associated with the establishment of gerontocracy, a form of oligarchical rule in which an entity is ruled by leaders who are significantly older than most of the adult population. The majority of scholars set the starting year for economic stagnation at 1975, although some claim that it began as early as the 1960s. Industrial growth rates declined during the 1970s, as heavy industry and the arms industry were prioritized while Soviet consumer goods were neglected. Dissolution of Soviet Union. Following the 18-year rule of Leonid Brezhnev, Yuri Andropov served in the post from November 1982 until his death in February 1984, never changing much of Brezhnev doctrine. Konstantin Chernenko briefly led the Soviet Union from February 1984 until his death on 1985. Mikhail Gorbachev was the eighth and final leader of the Soviet Union. His policies of perestroika and glasnost, that mean restructuring and openness, failed to reach Ukraine. The Chernobyl disaster in 1986, the Russification policies and the social, the economic stagnation and the forced deportations of people to Siberia and other places led several Ukrainians to oppose to the Soviet rule. Perestroika policy was never introduced, and the lack of reform on industry and agriculture led to confusion, turned into opposition to Soviet state itself. Glasnost policy, which ended state censorship, led Ukrainian people to reconnect with their compatriots in Ukraine, to the revitalization of religious practices and to the establishment of several opposition pamphlets, journals, and newspapers. August coup was a failed attempt in Moscow, made by hardliners of the Soviet Union's Communist Party, to take control of the country away from Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the Soviet president and general secretary of the party.
Мы должны все сделать для того, чтобы реформировалась партия и стала живой силой перестройки.
Following this, on the 24th of August 1991, the Supreme Soviet of Ukraine declared independence and renamed Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic to the name used nowadays, Ukraine. An overwhelming majority of 92.3% voted for independence. Notably, the Crimea, which had originally been a territory RSFSR until 1954, supported the referendum by a 54% majority and eastern Ukraine by an 80% majority. This referendum was almost immediately recognized internationally, and Leonid Kravchuk was elected president with 62% of Ukrainian votes.
Що вам потрібно радитися? Я хочу вас запитати.
Vested with presidential powers, he and his Russian and Belarusian counterparts declared that the Soviet Union had effectively ceased to exist, and it was formally dissolved on the 26th of December 1991. I'm happy that you got to the final of the video. These are the key points of Ukraine history in the 20th century. I hope I've been able to explain it to you and that we could be helpful. Give us a like to help with the disclosure of the video and subscribe to remain up to date on the content that we are preparing for you. Tell us what do you think in the comments.